This video is brought to you by Squarespace. What kind of website are you working with? Do you even have a website? What's going on, girl? Do you not want to build an online presence? If you don't, that's okay. We're about autonomy on this channel. But if you do, Squarespace is where you need to build one at. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform for you to build your own online presence and get your voice or your products out there. From online stores to your own personal website or business to analytics, whatever you need, Squarespace helps you out. The very first website that I ever built was through Squarespace through a podcast promo code, actually. It was honestly so easy to manage and work with. My website looked super profesh. And also the thing that I love the most about Squarespace is that it automatically optimizes your website for mobile, because other website platforms that I use don't do that for you. So you gotta go back in and make sure that your website or whatever you have doesn't look messed up on a telephone. And most of us are looking at things on phones. So if you have an online platform that will just do it automatically for you, I mean, girl, come on. So if you want to start forming your online presence, building a website, Squarespace is the place to do it. So go to squarespace.com/KhadijahMbowe and enter promo code KHADIJAMBOWE and get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. All right, let's get back to the video. Okay, picture it. It's April 2011. We're almost into Taurus season, thank God. You've been bumping S&M by Rihanna for like the umpteenth time. You hear about the release of a film, not just a film, but the actors that are gonna be in this film called The Hunger Games. The reason I say picture it is because if you are me, you're like, what's this about? Okay, that's cute, I guess, whatever. But you don't really care. People are announcing that this little black girl is gonna be this character called Rue, and you're still just like, cute, sure, whatever. And then sometime later, you don't remember how much time later, because this was over a decade ago. This was a decade ago, not over, but still. You start seeing these really troubling tweets. Now, you don't have Twitter, but everyone takes screen caps. So you start peeping some wild shit about how people are real mad that this little black girl is playing this little Rue character in this movie and book series you never even heard of. Let's roll some of the most aggressive tweets, shall we? Awkward moment when Rue is some black girl and not the little blonde innocent girl you picture. At Egan McCoy. Egan or Egan? Egan, what? And for the record, I'm still pissed that Rue is black. Like, you think she might have mentioned that? Is it just me or ... I was pumped about the Hunger Games until I learned that a black girl was playing Rue. Why does Rue have to be black? Not gonna lie, kinda ruined the movie. Some ugly little girl with nappy I think that means ass, hair, pissed me off. She was supposed to be cute and at least remind her of Prim. Damn, some of y'all don't realize that someone can remind you of someone else just based off the essence of who they are, but anyway. Why is Rue black? Sigh. There are much worse tweets out there. If you just Google Rue black Twitter responses, you'll find some N-words and whatnot. But either way, all of this happened. You know what? I'm not gonna go into the full story of this because Yara Zay did a whole video on it. If you haven't seen it, check it out because it's what reminded me of this event. But she did a whole video on it. I'll link it below so that y'all can get the full details. It was in my watch later queue and I filmed this video and then I watched it and I was like, oh my God, how could I have forgotten about this? So I wanted to add this segment, so that's why you'll also notice that I have a different outfit on in the actual body of the video. The reason that I am also bringing it up is because it really fits into this video that I'm talking about, and I think Yara actually used one of the reports that I used later on in this video about why, one, a lot of these people didn't actually know how to read, because if they did, you could tell that the character of Rue was meant to actually be black, so like, sorry about it. And two, why all of a sudden these people who love this book, love this character, thought it was so sad that she died, didn't feel the same way when they found out she had a little bit of extra melanin. And now you're upset because you found out she was black. So you're upset because you cried about a little black girl dying, and now you're like, it's dumb, I would have never cried over a little black girl dying. It's almost like racism is a real thing. It's almost like racism affects black children at a disproportionate rate. It's almost like the same stereotypical and dehumanizing traits you pin on black women, you put on little black girls, so it makes it easier for you to not see them as the children they are. It's almost like that. The pants, the pants, the pants, ooh, ooh, the pants, ooh, ooh, the pants, ooh, ooh, the pants, the pants, tiger print pants, ooh, ooh, the pants. Are we good? Is the lighting still good? Oh, I'm out of breath, wow. Hello and welcome back to my channel. Why did I make that so sexual? I don't know what's going on with me today. Okay. My name is Khadija, your favorite internet play auntie, or as I like to quote myself, cool, fun millennial auntie. I hope y'all know that that's a joke because I quoted myself from a video. Like it's me just trying to be funny and really embrace this auntie culture before people put the label on me without me being ready because I'm old and I'm dying. Anyway, if you are new, feel free to take a look around. I sit in my workspace and talk about whatever I want. Nieces, nephews, nibblings, aunties, uncles, piblings, how y'all doing? What's up, fam jam? What's up, Rainbow Coalition? I see you. Why you look so good? Oh my God, you look so cute, yes. Did you drink water yet today? I got mine. Let's all take a collective water break. I'm gonna mute that because I hate when I don't like ASMR. I hate when people drink into microphones. It literally makes me crazy. So let's get to the crux of the matter. Let's get to it. You like the box braids? I haven't had box braids in like 2 years. Why can't I focus? Do I have ADHD? So as I said in the opening, today we're going to be talking about the adultification of young black girls. I'm just going to be using young black girls as the language throughout the video. So if that socialization fits for you, then yeah. So in order to do all of that though, we're gonna run through the itinerary. Basically, first, I'm gonna talk about the construction of childhood, which is just a fancy academia way of me saying that I'm gonna explain what childhood really is, or talk about the way we socially define childhood, what it means to be a child versus or slash what childhood actually is. I'm gonna do the best I can with that one. Then I'll tell you all about what adultification is and talk about the harm that it does. And I'm going to be using a study from the Georgetown Law Center on Poverty and Inequality, which is very interesting. And I do recommend y'all check it out. Links and works cited and all that stuff will be in the description. And also, just so y'all know, a lot of the studies that I'm going to be using have a lot of infographics and like visuals. So it's not just dense readings for anyone that has a hard time with like pages and pages of words. Then I'm gonna talk about how this adultification creeps into the myth of young black girls being labeled as loose or fast and all that stuff simply for existing in a young black body, and how that creates a phenomenon known as sexual to prison pipeline, or the sexual to prison pipeline. We're going to talk about that a little bit too. Then I'll talk a bit about how this adultification has effects on black women going into adulthood. And in my final thoughts, I'll just talk a little bit about white spree killers and why they're able to be taken into custody without so much as a boo-boo, and just my general thoughts on all this bullshit, because this adultification of young black girls is bullshit. So we're going to talk about it. Yeah. So for this part of the video, I actually read part of a textbook titled An Introduction to Childhood Studies, edited by Mary Jane Kahili. And surprisingly, you can find a PDF of this online for free, but I'll have it in the folder of the works cited for this video, so you don't have to go too far. Because we all deserve access to education. Fundamental human right, just like water, clean drinking water. But in this textbook, Kahili breaks down how the ideal or concept of childhood is created by adults through our memories of what it meant for us to be children, and that how we define childhood or see children largely depends on the, quote, cultural assumptions of adults. Indeed, a baby is a material and biological reality. Yet at the same time, every baby born is born into a social world, a linguistic world, a gendered world, an adult world full of discourse with complex and contradictory meanings. The helpless and totally dependent human infant without control or language is given meaning by adults from the first minute its parents start to interact with it in the context of the wider world. It's the idea that being a baby or a child is a biological reality, but what it means to be a baby or a child is largely dependent on what adults decide it is, based on the wider context of the world around us and the times that we live in. In this textbook, there is an acknowledgement of reality of a person being a child, which is important because the last thing we want is predators absolving themselves of anything by claiming the concept of child is a construct, because no. And I don't think, at least based off how I've interpreted this textbook, I don't believe that that's what they're trying to say. How I understand it is that child, person, that is a small person, learning, brains developing, all of that stuff, is a reality, but childhood is a creation, and the meaning of childhood changes. Are we following? Child therefore defines not just physiological immaturity, but also connotes dependency, powerlessness, and inferiority. Childhood, however, focuses more on the general state of being a child, does not refer to an individual child, and suggests the existence of a distinct, separate, and fundamentally different social group or category. It only has meaning in the context of a binary relationship with adulthood, and implicit in it is the idea that it is universal. Children have always existed, but childhood hasn't. At certain points in history and in certain parts of the world today, children have worked adult jobs or been married at very young ages, and so on. Now, why am I doing all this back and forth rigmarole, whatever you want to call it, about childhood? Because like the construction of gender or race, the construction of childhood carries with it a history, a belief in how we're meant to interact with children, and in who we define as children. If you have the privilege of having what is seen as a childhood, you are more closely seen as a child. If you haven't, it's much easier for you to be seen as a little adult before developmentally you actually are one. If we think about the way Black children were treated during slavery, some working as young as 3 years old, they didn't have childhoods like their white counterparts, and therefore weren't seen as children. Though this could be a kind of chicken or egg situation where you could argue that they weren't seen as children, so they were denied childhood, but either way you slice it, Black children at that time were not afforded the label of child and the subsequent protection that childhood garners. So when we look at what exactly it means to be stripped of a childhood as a child, we see how adultification is made possible. So adultification is a term that acknowledges the impact of viewing young children as adults before they're adults. Leave me alone. I told y'all I only have half an English degree. Do you think these scripts are going to be perfect? So I mentioned in the beginning of this video that I was going to be talking about the Georgetown Law Center for Poverty and Inequality study that they did on this, and that's what I'm going to be using to get the definition of adultification. In the Georgetown study, they argued that adultification can take two forms within the context of Black girlhood. The first one being a process of socialization in which children function at a more mature developmental stage because of situational context and necessity, especially in low-resource community environments. If your family doesn't have the money, let's say, to hire a babysitter, then you end up becoming the third parent to your sibling or siblings, which means you don't have time to be playing outside with all your little friends or doing all the kid stuff because you're taking care of the babies. As an example, a personal one. The second form that they describe in the Georgetown study, Girl Interrupted, if I didn't mention the title before, is a social or cultural stereotype. Oof! They use my buzzword. A social or cultural stereotype that is based on how adults perceive children in the absence of knowledge of children's behavior and verbalizations. For example, adults who don't know the age of a child, assuming that that child is much older or perceiving that child as much older, and therefore treating that child like an adult. Which wouldn't seem so bad except for the fact that this comes with a slew of problems we'll dive more into later, but let me give you a little taste as per the Georgetown Girl Interrupted report. A snapshot of the data showed that compared to white girls at the same age, participants perceived that Black girls need less nurturing, less protection, to be supported less, to be comforted less, are more independent, know more about adult topics, know more about sex. As Dr. Monique W. Morris notes, the assignment of more adult-like characteristics to the expressions of young Black girls is a form of age compression. Along this truncated age continuum, Black girls are likened more to adults than to children, and are treated as if they are willfully engaging in behaviors typically expected of Black women. This compression has stripped Black girls of their childhood freedoms and renders Black girlhood interchangeable with Black womanhood. Thank you, Dr. Morris. As the study continues, they note the narrow definitions of Black female identity as a result of stereotypes like the Sapphire, the Jezebel, Mammy, just to name the three main ones. And I've talked about all of these stereotypes in several different videos, so honestly, just pick one. I'm sure I touched on it at some point. But it's interesting to note that these stereotypes are supposed to be applying to Black women. Yet because of this age compression of Black girls, they too are subject to these limiting views of what it means to be a Black woman or girl. Because as Dr. Morris said, the two end up becoming interchangeable. This adultification blurs the line. The loud, aggressive, naturally hypersexual, sassy caregiver categories that Black women are relegated to are also stifling boxes that Black girls are put into simply because they were born in a Black woman's body or simply because they were socialized as Black women. And remember in my stereotyping reference video how I talked about this feedback loop of the victim of a stereotype playing into it because they think they're supposed to? This study points out that some young Black girls feel like they have to be aggressive and in control because that's what it means to be a Black woman, because that's what society told them it means to be a Black woman, I should say. It becomes this exhausting, self-fulfilling prophecy over and over and over again. So again, from the Georgetown study, Girl Interrupted, you find that this adultification causes Black girls to be punished at disproportionate rates compared to their white peers. And when I say punished, I'm talking about within the school context. There's this idea that because Black girls are loud and aggressive, they are unladylike and therefore require more discipline. And we can't get into the semantics of what ladylike means because we would honestly be here all day talking about white womanhood and how, particularly in this part of the world, what it means to be a woman is a very narrow sort of view, but check out my women video if you want to get into that, because, you know, she could use the views. I'm just being honest. Anyways, as Edward Morris notes in the study, quote, schools not only serve as sites for construction of race, class, and gender identities, they also reproduce existing inequalities in these areas. Schools solidify or even exaggerate the inequalities children bring with them to school. And this study shows the difference of how Black and white girls are disciplined at school when it comes to single or multiple suspensions, and how disproportionate it is given the difference in enrollment numbers. But school isn't the only place you find this discrepancy. So I now want to talk about this concept known as the sexual or sexual to prison pipeline, but before I do that, I just want to dispel or discuss or dissect the myth of the loose, fast girl and why Black girls are seen in this way. So I just want to quickly throw this in there because in the Georgetown study, they talk about how there's evidence that, quote, on average, African American girls mature physically at a faster rate than white girls. And of course, you can see how that would play a factor into people perceiving Black girls as older. But in the Black community, there's this idea perpetuated by adults about making sure that Black girls aren't too fast or loose.
You done around my mother man and had 2 motherfucking children.
And this isn't even exclusive in American culture or Canadian culture, because even in Gambia and other parts of Africa, at least with other children of the diaspora that I have spoken to, in Wolof they call it speed, like halibidefa speed, like that child is fast. It literally just means the same thing. A couple of other books that talk about this concept on a more personal and also sociological lens are Morgan Jenkins' This Will Be My Undoing and Mikki Kendall's Hood Feminism. Read both of those books. They are so good. Oh my God, they're so good. Just read them. Just read them. But also, if you're a Black girl, you don't really need to read those books to know what I'm talking about. In a previous video, I talked about the difference between sexual access versus sexual desire, noting that people often confuse the two and assume that if you're a sexually desirable person, or if you're displaying yourself as such, they're allowed to have sexual access to you. Now, if we think about that, adding adultification of Black girls and how some of our bodies apparently develop sooner than our white peers, it's easy to see how society can turn all of this around and blame us for getting pregnant at younger ages or getting too much attention from older men, and so on and so on. Why question a grown-ass man and ask them to do better? Why ask them to consider their sister or mother or cousin or daughter or grandmama or anyone when they're catcalling children and grooming these kids out in these streets? Nah. Let's use the internalized stereotype of the naturally hypersexual Black woman, which we should all note was created by white men to justify their insatiable lust for the exoticized other. They didn't just do it to Black women. I talked about that in my East Asian stereotypes video, we know this. But let's just internalize that naturally hypersexual narrative of Black women's bodies, force that label onto young Black girls before they've even had a chance to develop a sense of their bodies, themselves, whatever, and blame them instead of grown-ass adults who should know better than to be grooming and talking to literal children. I would say I'm sorry, but I'm not, because I meant every word of that. I said it with my chest, my sternum, and my medulla oblongata. I know that's not the right thing, but I said it with everything, okay? Ooh, some of y'all need to be checking your husbands instead of these little girls. But y'all don't want to hear that. It's just white supremacy and the patriarchy working hand in hand to disrupt little Black girls' development and try to stop them and stifle them from being great. It boils my blood. And don't even get me started about how y'all be treating young Black trans girls because you think they chose this lifestyle and they deserve whatever they get. Y'all need help. Leave children alone. The other part of this trying to prevent young Black girls from being too loose or too fast is that a lot of Black people, Black adults, particularly Black mothers, will say this as a way of protection, like they think they're protecting their children. And I get that. But I'm hurt your feelings, because what that is not protection. You're not protecting Black girls from abuse by policing their bodies and mannerisms at every opportunity. What you're doing is telling Black girls that there's something wrong with the body they were born into. And if they're a trans Black girl, there's something wrong with them wanting to be in that type of body or existing in that type of body. I hope I said that correctly. You're asking a child to make accommodations for adults who act too ignorant to know better, even though they know better. Rant over. Now we can get to the sexual to prison pipeline. So last year when I was doing research for my For the Boys video, I came across this idea, or this concept, sorry, of the sexual to prison pipeline. And I was trying to figure out when I could do a video where it would fit, and this is the one. So the sexual to prison pipeline explains why so many young girls that are assaulted or abused end up being funneled into jail or juvenile centers as opposed to, I don't know, actually getting the help they might need. And that's me glossing it very much so, but I'm gonna talk a lot about more stats and things to show the number of young girls that are in juvenile centers and how many of them have been victims or survivors of sexual or abuse. So these are some stats from another study from the Human Rights Project for Girls in partnership with the Georgetown Law Center for Poverty and Inequality and Miss Foundation. 1 in 4 American girls will experience some form of violence by the age of 18. 15% of sexual assault and victims are under the age of 12. Nearly half of all female rape survivors were victimized before the age of 18. And girls between the ages of 16 and 19 are 4 times more likely than the general population to be victims of attempted rape or sexual. So how this factors in is that girls who experience sexual or abuse are, quote, rooted into the juvenile justice system because of their victimization, particularly girls of color. Black girls make up about 14% of the general population, but account for 33.2% of girls detained and committed. Indigenous girls make up 1% of the general youth population, but 3.5% are detained and committed. So there are still a lot of studies that need to be done on why more girls are being incarcerated, particularly at juvenile centers. But a speculation that this study uses is that because these girls are dealing with abuse in varying degrees, a lot of the petty crimes that they're being arrested for are just reactions to trauma. Things like running away and substance abuse are a couple of examples that they use. Another thing to note is that these girls aren't being charged with super violent or major crimes. But when we think about how young ladies should act, again, going back to that ladylike idea, it's easy to speculate what's happening and why it's happening more to Black and brown girls. So police roll up, see a Black or brown girl conducting herself in a way that they don't deem how a young girl should be acting based on perhaps how young white girls act, or how we stereotype Black women and put those labels onto Black girls, and so on. And instead of approaching the situation with, I don't know, consideration for why this child is acting this way, they just arrest the child, or in Ma'Khia Bryant's case, kill the child. And I know police officers aren't social workers, but wouldn't it be nice if they were trained like social workers? Wouldn't that be interesting? They were taught to talk first instead of shoot. This isn't a video about police abolition. Khadijah, calm it down. I'd really encourage y'all to check out these studies. I'm going to link them, of course, as I always do with my works cited folder, all that stuff. But they break it down by state in terms of girls being incarcerated, how many have been victims of abuse or different types of abuse. They also break it down by race, go into mental health a little bit. Like, it's really eye-opening. But I want to leave you with a quote from this study that I think really summarizes this sexual to prison pipeline. Girls' common reactions to trauma are criminalized and exacerbated by involvement in the juvenile justice system, leading to a cycle of abuse and imprisonment. So now I just want to talk a bit about how the adultification of Black girls and adolescents affects them as adults. And I'm just going to be speaking about all of this based off the ponderings that I've been doing from all of the research. So one of the ideas or themes that I've noticed in the research that I was doing for this is that Black girls are seen as independent and self-sufficient. They're seen as that at a very young age, and that bleeds into how we're seen as adults. The amount of strong Black woman who don't need no man narratives and memes that I saw growing up really made me think that it was a compliment, or that it was like good for me to be able to stand on my own and not need help from anyone. As a Black woman, I'm fed this absurd and contradictory message that I should be proud of my independence and resilience. But then it ends up being used against me, particularly by Black men and older Black women that are like, you need to find a man and a husband, which, like, gay, not happening. One place that you can see that depiction of being strong and independent and whatever being used against Black women is in the Sapphire stereotype. Because not only is she fearless and strong and independent and all of these things, she's also abrasive and aggressive, and it's just always harping on her man. I'm supposed to aspire to her, but also hold down my man. It's just also straight too. God, it's also straight. This gets me thinking that the reason that I think it's so hard for people to admit that they have a hard time centering Black women's voices and just taking what we say as, I don't know, the truth, is because we occupy an intersection that feminism has a difficult time making space for. White women, we gotta chat. Hey ladies, we gotta talk. Because I think from what I noticed, and this is why I say white feminism, but not necessarily white feminists, because I don't think every white feminist is like this, but white feminism needs rebranding, okay? That girl boss shit, it needs rebranding. But the foundations of like white feminism just seem very like screaming about sisterhood and rah, 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 yes. But some of y'all be forgetting that you're still white. If you have to pick between your womanhood or your whiteness, a lot of times you'll see white women push aside their womanhood to, we can see that in the number of people that voted for Trump the first time, the number of white women that did, like, what? And now it's time for Correction Corner with Khadija. So this is why fact checking is very important, because originally what I had heard from like 2016, this was a narrative that white women came out in droves for Trump, something like 53%. And even with Trump, well, we know he lies, but saying 52% of white women voted for him, all this other stuff. Those were incorrect exit polls from 2016. Pew Research Center actually went back and found out that it was actually 47% of women that voted for Trump. That's still a high number, but it's not as high as 53%, so I just wanted to add that in there. And I left this part in of me saying that because it's to let y'all know that even someone like me who likes to do a lot of research and stuff can know that, or not know, can hear things from things that I think are credible and then find out later that they're not. And this was through a quick Google search. Like, Maddie didn't fact check this part for me. I just went on Google to make sure that I wasn't talking nonsense. And look at that. So I would apologize, but also I don't think that the women who vote for Trump watch my videos. So if you are, girl, why? Come on now. Why would you do that? There's just this expectation for Black and brown women, women of color, to forego their race or ethnicity in the name of sisterhood. And it's not that easy for us. Like, I'm sorry. I can't just take off my skin and just be like, I'm a woman. And I always talk about how you'll see people say white people or white men, white people, women, and people of color. And it's like, y'all need to remember that every time you do that, you're forgetting to include the fact that within people of color, there are women in that. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just going to talk very binary about it for the sake of this argument, but I don't think a lot of people realize when they're saying that people of color, you're immediately lumping Black and brown women into a category that mutes part of their identities. It's like you're willing to acknowledge our race, but not our womanhood or femininity or anything like that. And don't get me started about if you add queerness into the mix. Good Lord, good Lord. Black women are underrepresented when it comes to the media and social outrage, even though statistically speaking, and this is from the website 538 in an article titled "Why Black Women Are Missing from Conversations About Police Violence." They pulled a couple of stats, one being that women of all colors make up less than 4% of people that are fatally shot by the police. But 20% of those women are Black, and Black women only make up 13% of the US population. Danielle Kilgo, a professor of journalism, diversity, and equity at the University of Minnesota, posits that the reason for this underrepresentation in the media is because it doesn't fit in with our almost expectation at this point that if a Black person is going to be fatally shot by the police, they're going to be a Black man. There isn't a consideration that racism and misogynoir could play into Black women's interactions with the police. Again, there can be white people and women we just assume are white women, and then there can be people of color. But women of color is just too much to say and too much to think about, so let's just put them in with people of color until white feminism needs the numbers and the support. Am I wrong? Are you gonna look at me and tell me that I'm wrong? Priscilla, my fairy godchild and assistant researcher, pulled some really great articles about how Black women are treated when it comes to medical care, our pain not being taken seriously, the fact that childbirth is a serious cause of death, maternal mortality rates in America. Though I guess in general, America has an interesting maternal mortality and infant mortality rate when it comes to childbirth. And I don't know, does it have something to do with the fact that white male doctors pushed Black midwives out of the profession? Because countries with midwives, they seem to be doing all right. But I would suggest y'all read all of them or go through some of them, because that has a lot to do with how adultification affects Black women as adults. As I always say, when you reduce people to a few stereotypes, when you whittle down someone's personhood to arbitrary assumptions about how you think they are, you strip them of their humanity. And when you don't see someone as human like you, it's much easier to, I don't know, justify not giving them pain meds when they tell you they're in agony, because people who look like them are known for being dramatic. By the way, Canada also, time to talk about Canada. Canada also has this problem, particularly with Indigenous women, going to hospitals saying that they're in pain or saying that something is up, and people just not taking their pain seriously, not believing them. I'm gonna pull some of the articles that Maddie found for that, because she also pointed out that sometimes if that happens and you're the mother of a child, the staff will use that as an excuse to deem you as an unfit mother and then take your child away. And that happened a lot in the States with the crack epidemic, this idea of crack mothers and people taking away a lot of Black mothers. You know what? I'm doing all these things that are not part of this video. I'm sorry. We will link all of that stuff below. I am also currently reading a book about policing Black lives, and it's a history of policing and state violence against Black folks in Canada. So once I finish that one, ooh, just you wait. Got something for that ass, Canada. On April 20th at 4:44 Eastern Standard Time, Columbus police arrived at the foster home of Ma'Khia Bryant. Police were responding to a 911 call from a woman claiming that, quote, "There's these grown girls here trying to fight us, trying to stab us, trying to put their hands on our grandma. Get here now." In the body cam footage released some hours later, a police officer can be seen repeatedly asking, "What's going on?" Ma'Khia pushes a girl to the ground, and the police officer immediately pulls his gun out, yelling, "Get down, get down." As Ma'Khia goes towards a second girl with a knife in hand, the police officer immediately shoots her 4 times. Ma'Khia Bryant would later be pronounced dead at a local hospital at 5:21 p.m. She was only 16 years old. Now, many of us know this story and can see how tragic it was that a 16-year-old had to lose her life fighting with 2 girls that were much older than her, 20 and 22 to be exact, over house chores. But to me, there's something more telling about what happened to Bryant and many Black girls like her that either lose their lives at the hands of police, are handled more violently when it comes to school discipline, or when girls like her are deemed as needing less protection simply because they were born in a Black girl's body. Whew, okay. There's, I feel like there's so much I could say, but there's also so much that's just like stuck in my brain, because I think I just kind of want to reflect on this video a bit more and ponder and understand. One thing I, of course, do want to note, as I said at the beginning of the video, is police officers, y'all, come on now. Y'all are able to get these white spree killers, people that have actually murdered people, grown men that have murdered people, into custody safe and sound. But a 16-year-old Black girl holding a knife, you have a problem. I don't understand how. And we know how, because 1, you see a 16-year-old Black girl as a grown woman. 2, there's this whole idea of how women are supposed to behave. And because that idea is measured under the frame of white femininity and white womanhood, you automatically deem her behavior as something completely different. And maybe this police officer isn't thinking all of these things in the split second of seeing a girl holding a knife towards another girl. Like, I get it. I get it. But I'm just saying, clearly y'all need to figure out a different way if y'all are so obsessed with still having police, which I just, It's abolish police all day on this channel. But y'all are so obsessed with still having police officers, you need to figure out some type of training, because this ain't it. Like I said, wouldn't it be a miracle if police officers were trained like social workers and weren't allowed to just be having guns willy-nilly? There's this weird self-fulfilling kind of prophecy of like, you train police officers to think that they're always at a war and that everyone's after them and it's dangerous. And then you see all of these stereotypical depictions of people in these bodies. And I don't know. This is not the right video for this. I'm going to shelf that for a second and think about it more. But beyond all of that stuff of the way Black girls are disciplined and treated and all of this by authority figures because of this adultification, the other part of it that I think is super, super damaging is the fact that you have grown adults, particularly grown men, hitting on young Black girls, grooming them, doing all of this stuff. And everybody points the finger at little Black girls and tells them, don't be so fast. That's why you got pregnant, because you fast. Oh, that's blah, blah, blah's kid. Yeah, she fast. She out here all the time, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, how about you ask the little boys to do better? But that would mean acknowledging your own psychological patriarchy. That would mean acknowledging the misogynoir that is embedded in a lot of us that we don't even realize. And again, human beings, we really like to think that we're better people than we are. So, as I always say, how about you ask yourself the hard questions before you start pointing at other people? Ask yourself, why am I trying to police a 13-year-old Black girl's body? Why am I pushing stuff onto her? Yeah, I'm trying to protect her, but is this really protecting her? Or is this going to give her a complex when she gets older to feel uncomfortable with her body? Or to feel like her body is a site only for sexual desire and access for men? Is that what are those the seeds that I'm sowing into my young daughter or my young child or whatever by shaming them for existing in a body that they didn't ask to be born into? You know, I need us to just ask these questions. I get very protective of young Black girls because not on my fucking watch. Just not. Like, I will not tolerate it. You will not call a Black girl fast or loose in my presence and have me sit there and go, yeah, that's okay. Fuck no. No. Talk to these adults. Talk to these grown ass men that are out here. See, I'm gonna start again. Y'all gonna get me to start again, and I don't need to be doing that right now. What I wanna say is that I really hope this video, particularly for folks that I hope for Black women, girls, femme-identified, I hope that for y'all, and this is just, again, if you're socialized as a Black woman, if you are a Black woman, if you identify as a Black woman, I hope that for y'all, this gave you a bit of language to use and helped you maybe understand the stuff that you kind of felt like was a little wrong when you were growing up and didn't quite understand why you were always being like looked at and picked on or being told you were so grown for your age or to stop acting grown when you were just existing. Like, I hope for y'all this has given you a language. And for all of you other people, you people, no. For everybody else that watched this video, I know that in other communities, in Indigenous communities, in Latino communities, I know that there's a dealing of this as well. I don't know how it manifests and stuff. So maybe comment below and let me know how that kind of works within your cultures, depending on what background you're from. If you are a grown adult of any background, watch yourself, check your tone, question yourself and the way you're interacting with young children in Black and brown bodies. Question the way you're treating young Black girls, because the numbers don't lie. And a lot of y'all teachers in schools be out here with some weird, you forget that your internalized biases and stereotypes of how you view grown-ups can translate to children, and especially with adultification. If you think grown Black women are loud, aggressive, all of these things, the stereotypes that you've ingested through media, through film, whatever, it is not a far reach to assume that you might be doing that to young Black children that, through no fault of their own, are just out here. You know, so I would definitely encourage you to do some reading on this. If you are an educator, particularly, do some reading on this and really confront any biases that you think you might have, because we don't need children growing up feeling like there is something inherently wrong with them simply for existing in a body they didn't ask to be born into. Like, as I said, I just get very protective of the babies and The little black girls I will not tolerate it, okay? And we are adults, so we need to get our shit together, okay? I am sorry. This final thoughts is kind of all over the place. I think it's just because there's still so much that there's so much and so little that I want to think about with this subject. So little because I feel like I touched on the stuff that I wanted to, but I know I missed some things. And so much because I think I'm still just trying to understand how adultification has affected me. You know, I took care of my little brother a lot when he was a kid. I felt like his second mom, I remember. And that's just because my parents work. Like, they just had to work. My older sister had to do it with me, my younger sister, and then I did it with my little brother. So I knew how to do all that stuff from a young age. Like, and my mom, it was the same thing for her when she lost both of her parents at a very young age, within like a year of each other, and she just had to figure it out. So there was that factor of it. And then as well, just being in this body, being seen as more adult than I actually was by people that should have known better. I definitely always felt like I didn't get as much protection. I had to do a lot of growing up, a lot sooner than I wanted to, or even expected to. And so whenever people ask me about stuff from childhood or things that I remember, or anything like that, I actually have a hard time remembering. And part of me thinks it's because my brain is protecting me because trauma. But also I just really have a hard time really thinking about having a childhood that much. There are obviously moments in there. I wasn't like in some prison. Like, obviously there were moments of fun and being a kid and stuff, but there's a lot of moments of feeling like I was put into an adult position. Looking back on it, obviously now as an adult, I can see that those were adult situations or adult responsibilities and stuff. And so I always kind of laugh as an adult now whenever people are like, oh, well, you're just so independent, or you're just so self-sufficient, or you're able to just do stuff. Like one time, one of my friends from school, I had told them that my parents were visiting, and they were like, oh, it's just so hard for me to imagine your parents. Like, it just feels like you just appeared. Like, and I laughed about it, but after I was like, it is exhausting being the person that people think all the time doesn't need help and it's just an independent bad bitch. Like, yes, there's a place for that, but balance. It's exhausting to constantly feel like you don't need help and you have to be strong and independent and fight for everyone and stand up for everyone. Like, it's so tiring. And this is where I'm going to get cheesy about it. But I just am really thankful for my partner because she understands what that feels like. And it's the first time I've ever been with somebody that has the same sort of, like, obviously we have different backgrounds, but a similar sort of background and the same sort of caring energy and independence and strength and resilience in that. I don't know. It's the first time I've ever been with somebody that I feel like gets that I need support and knows how I would need it without me always having to say it, which, having dated lots of different types of people, that's always been a difficult thing to express or to get. And obviously that has to do with many factors, some being that I didn't really know myself when I was dating these people and I have a better stance on myself now, whatever. But I think it also, I'd have to say a big factor of it is just being with a Black woman. It's just a different, shit just hits different, okay? Like, the shit just hits different. Yeah, anyway, I don't know what else I have to say. If I do a Q&A after this, then maybe I'll have more thoughts, or the questions will help get more thoughts across. But all I will say now is feed your plets, water your plets, and remember that you can always change your mind, because you can. And I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye. What you doing?
Walking around.
I'm recording.
Oh, my fault.
Yo, I'm interviewing Muhammad. You wanna say hi?
Face.
You wanna say hi to you?
Oh, I'm about to tell him about to change my PIN number. Tell him I'm about to change my PIN number.
Abdul, Muhammad said he's about to change his PIN number.
Cash App that you can trust one of your friends that take money from you.
What?
Nobody takes money from there. Nobody takes money from there except for you.
Before you got deported.
Shut up. I did not get to, I didn't get deported, so thank God Almighty. Deja has became this media mogul just like less than 3 months, and it's all because of me.
You were so
Did I forget it?
stupid.
You know, I had the kids in me when I was born, and then I dropped it off to her when she was born, and then now look at her with intricate videos, you know, just killing it. You guys are welcome. Everybody in the world is welcome for having Khadija. Person like that. I got arrested, I think, like 7 times.
You don't want to advertise or plug anything?
Yes, I do. Plastic Ink Cafe. Like, Yahweh never knew I got arrested or none of that until, like, that letter came to the house. You know, Yasi Dollar and mail.
What is your Instagram?
My Instagram is Mo Black.
I know, a federal. You tell her it's a federal offense to open someone else's mail, and she's like, what?
Yeah. Order some chicken wings. We got the best chicken wings. Lemon pepper dry, lemon pepper spicy. Yeah, what you need, you got it. Anybody that's looking, I'm taking. These ladies, stay off my page, stay out my DMs. So you guys are welcome. Everybody out there on Khadija land. I know I'm handsome, you know. I got the mustache going.
Oh my God.
I'm Khadija's doppelganger, the female version. It's because of me, like I said, Khadija's who she is. Check this out. Balls right here.
I have one last question for you.
This nigga's shop is called China Man's Barbershop. Wow.
Is you done or is you finished?
Oh shit, no, okay, let me go see you get this call. That's the ink baby. We're talking out here. Yeah. Make sure you put that in the video. And let me know so I can share it.
Okay.
Alright, thank you. Peace out.
Bye.